Hello my friends, this is my MakeNoise system. This video will be similar to my other video that I've done, which is an introduction to synthesis using the Pittsburgh Modular SV1, but this time we're going to have a more West Coast flavoring to it. All of these modules, save for a few, are made by MakeNoise, as you can obviously see. The only ones that aren't would be this disting right here, which is a wonderful module. I'll talk about that for a little bit. The oscilloscope over here, and the output module right here. Other than that, everything is MakeNoise, except for this math panel is not stock. It's made by Magpie Modular. Chris Northern makes these panels and they're really neat, so I would really suggest you check them out. Anyways, moving on. So I'll talk about the modules that I have in this case and why I chose them and basically what their functions are without getting way too in depth. So the layout of the case is kind of broken up into a few sections. So to the left here we have sound generation. These are oscillators. We have sound mixing. This is the RX-MX. Essentially there are 6 inputs, and with these lights you can see which output you have coming out of this summed output, and you can also radiate the channels so you have more. This is the LXD, which is a low-pass filter, but it's also Vactrol based. So you have your 2 different responses here. You have 12 dB roll-off and a 6 dB roll-off. These don't have knobs, unfortunately, but it still works with these CV inputs. And a nice feature, you can also strike them, strike the Vactrol. And I'll talk about those in a bit. And then here's the Optimix. This is kind of like my main mixer and also kind of a performance module. Here's the oscilloscope. This just visualizes the voltages. And right now I already have it preset so that the sum of all of the inputs come out here and go straight into the oscilloscope and then to the output. Okay, so here is sound generation, here is controlling the sounds, and over here we have kind of like logic and control. So this is my primary function generator and slew and voltage generator. It does so much. I'll come to this maybe last, I don't know, but it's definitely on the list. I will talk about this. Here is the woggle bug. I feel like this is like this spirit of my synthesizer because it's random voltages. It's quite nice. This is like the only module that I've kept since I started Eurorack, which is like 3 systems ago or something. You'll come to learn in Eurorack, if you're as crazy as I am, that you will go through different iterations of systems and different layouts, and you'll swap modules and change it all the time. So I've gone through so many different designs and cases, and while it doesn't really help monetarily, it definitely gives you a better edge on how to know your way around a modular system. Next is the Tempi, which is kind of like a clock modulator. I'll get to that. And then here is the Rene, which is a Cartesian sequence. It's really neat. I'll get to that. So this complex oscillator is modeled after the Buchla complex oscillator, but I feel that this one might have a bit better perks to it. I don't know. It's all up to your personal preference, but what you have here is a dual oscillator system. You have an oscillator here and an oscillator here. So you have 3 outputs per oscillator. This one has triangle, saw, and sine, and you can control the frequency of it here. And there's a fine-tuning frequency. And then this one, you have a sine, a square, and then a final. So what the final output is essentially this sine wave that's been copied and then sent through these wave folding and wave shaping circuits. So you have a fold parameter, angle, and shape. You go from a sine to kind of like a spiky, sort of like upside down T shape. And you go to a fuzzy triangle, is what I like to call it. Then you have an angle here. You can go into like the plus harmonics or the minus harmonics. You can get some really gnarly sounds from the final output. It's one of my favorite oscillators that I've encountered so far. Over here, I'm not done with the DPO, but this is the STO. This is subtimbral oscillator. You have a triangle and a sine wave output, which you can wave shape with this knob. So all the way left it is a sine wave, and then all the way right is a triangle. I can show you that in a bit on the oscilloscope and maybe let you hear some of these. The sub oscillator is essentially the same pitch, but just an octave lower. So I can show you some wave shaping here. Here is the wave shaped output, and we can go right into the Optimix, bring up the level, and you see we have a sine wave. And then as I bring this over, you can start to see it kind of like wavefold a little bit there and get like distorted until we have kind of a spiky triangle. The reason I've read that they have like the little spikes in the middle here where it's supposed to be completely negative is that your ear can latch onto that, so it's kind of like extra harmonics. But anyways, you go from sine wave to triangle wave, and this is of course CV controllable. And once you do patch something into there, this knob just becomes an attenuator for the signal. Yeah, so you have frequency. Right. And then here's the sub oscillator. It's kind of like, it looks like a square wave added together with, I don't know, maybe like a sawtooth wave. Anyways, it looks pretty neat and it sounds really good too. If I can probably let you hear it, but I'm just not going to talk because my voice is going to sound like I'm speaking into a fan. Yeah, so that's pretty gnarly. I'll let you listen to this wave shaping too. You start out with the sine, and then you go to the spiky triangle. Right, so pretty nice. Over here we have a triangle wave and then a sawtooth and a sine. I've already said this, but we'll let you take a listen to these. Very nice. Here's sawtooth. And this also has kind of like a unique shape. The reason that these waveforms are kind of messy is because this isn't really lab equipment, it's a musical instrument, and it has a general shape of what it's supposed to look like, but it just has these variations to it because that gives it some extra harmonic content that makes it sound really nice. So I'll let you listen to this. Yep. The square is super nice. It's... Here, I'll let you listen. Square waves are always great. And then my favorite, the final output. Notice how when I patch this initially there's nothing coming out, and that is because we have added no harmonics, which is controlled by this knob. So once I start to add harmonics, you can start to see the thing come to life and fold over and over and over again until you get this kind of crazy wave. Then you can adjust the angle, which you can't really see, it's kind of dense. If I lower it a bit. And it's one thing to look at it, but it's another to see it. So let's turn this up a bit. I mean, to hear it, rather. Here we go. Right, so that's just like a taste of it. One thing I didn't mention is this black section here. This is the modulation bus. So this takes, I believe, the sine wave from here, this oscillator, and patches it into here. And the more you raise this, the more it's like an attenuator for how much signal goes to these three parameters, which you can control with the white knob, how much goes to it from here. So that's pretty nice. The other thing is the FM bus. So you can turn this up, and this, so what it does is the sine wave starts to frequency modulate this oscillator, and you can control how much linear FM you want and how much exponential FM you want. And also this sine wave frequency modulates this oscillator, and you can control how much linear and exponential FM you want to let in. So you can get some really, really nice, so if you bring this up and you want to give this some linear FM, and then you also want to get this to linear FM as well, so now these are like cross-modulating one another, and it results in some pretty nice sounds. The next section that I didn't really cover, and I can't go way too in depth, and there's also videos that have already done this, but these three modes. So there's lock, which is kind of like a soft sync. There's sync, which is a hard sync. And then there's LFO, which just brings it down to LFO ranges. And these two oscillators are really nicely like knitted together, and you can get a lot of functionality out of it. Okay, so I've talked about the oscillators a whole bunch. Let's move on to maybe this section. So the Rix mix, behind the panel here, these three inputs, these three and these three, they're normaled with a ribbon cable behind the two panels. So this one is the sawtooth, this one is the triangle, I believe, and then this one is the sine. This one is a triangle wave, which you can't really get to on the front. Then this one is the final, and this one is a spike, which is another waveform you can't really get to. And well, I can just show you. This is the sum output, B. I'll put that into here, and you can see here's the saw, and the triangle, the sine, the other triangle. Here is our final output, and there is the spike wave, which you can't really get to automatically. And that's kind of like the middle section here, what it'll look like. Cool, so there's that. You can get some really nice possibilities here. So if I bring this down and let's just say feed some random voltage into the channel select, you can see how it changes randomly, and it sounds pretty cool too. Yeah, it's a good party. Alright, moving right along. This is a multiple, pretty boring. You put a signal into here and it copies it 3 times, and if you don't have anything plugged into here, it'll copy it another 3 times. Very useful. That's about it for that. I recommend having at least one of them in your system. Or get some of these guys, which split the signal for you, but these are not buffered, so you might lose a little tiny bit of signal, but that's okay. Okay, this is the mod mix. This is really nice. This is like how you multiply signals together, because what it does is it affects the amplitude. So math 101 here, the amplitude of the signal is how strong it is or how loud it is. So I'll feed a sine wave into here, and well, this is kind of cheating because it's like filtering it, but I'm lowering the amplitude to nothing. Here it is being risen again, and I can show you if I plug this into the mod mix, and then let's get a slow sine wave to change the amplitude for us. You can already see through the LEDs what it's doing, but I will also show you with the oscilloscope. And this is kind of unique because it also changes the shape of the wave. You see, it just kind of like squishes it down, and then it becomes kind of like a I don't really know how to describe the shape, but anyways, if you do that enough, you start to get these side bands, which is called amplitude modulation. So if we bring that way up, you get like these really crazy shapes. And crazy sounds too. How about I just sweep through them for you? So that's amplitude modulation. Right. The Optimix is like a Vactral based filter, and I keep saying Vactral, but I never really explain what it is. It's essentially an LED, which is like hooked up right to like a light sensor, and then like encased around in like this like black material to like keep all the light in. But that kind of response time is something that's very musical and sounds very nice. So Vactrals aren't identical, so you'll get different response times with different Vactrals. So I'll just show you, let's just say a square wave into this one, and then we want to ping the Vactral with the gate. You can kind of hear it's like a little bit hollow, and yeah. You can hear this one instead. It kind of rings a little bit. So no two Vactrals are alike, and that's kind of what I like about them, because they have different response times and they sound so good. The LXD, I did explain it earlier, but it has two different roll-offs, and it essentially does the same thing as the Optimix, but it just doesn't have knobs for the CV. And there's a bunch of different neat features to it that make it worthy of being in your case, but I don't really have time to show all those. The O'Toole, this is a really deep module as well. I'm just using it as scope right now, but you can also look at the frequency content of different waves. You can use it as a metronome. You can see what tempo your gates are pinging at. You can do just so much with it. It's also a tuner. It's great. The disting over here, there are so many functions that I can't even begin to go over it, so we'll kind of skip that as well, sorry. But here's a really good one, the maths. So the maths is 4 channels. So the first channel has this function generator. It has a rise and a fall, and it has a response. So you go from like logarithmic to linear to then exponential, and that just changes like the time it takes for this thing to cycle. You can make it self-cycle. You can see the LED over here, kind of. Let me adjust the camera so you can kind of see it. Can make it slower, can get some like nice and complex envelopes here, and this channel is associated with this white knob, and this is kind of like a voltage, I mean the whole module is like a voltage computer. I'm really happy with it. But let's see here, you get a gate every time the rise ends. Over here you get a gate every time the cycle ends. You can trigger it to cycle itself, so you can like have gates control whether or not this button is pushed. You can trigger it like an envelope. You can send voltages into it and slew them, so you can change the response time on like the front end or the tail end or both, and you can change this. The right hand side is pretty much identical, except for the cycle and the rise gates are different. So these 1 and 4 channels are identical, and then you have channels 2 and 3, which are these 2 knobs. Channel 2 is 10 volts, while channel 3 is 5 volts. doesn't really matter, but if you just want like a stronger boost, you would use channel 2. And you can do a bunch with this. You can put 2 different oscillators in here and add them and subtract them, and then the sum of that would come out here, or the inverse of it would come out there, or it'll perform a logic operation OR on it. It does so much. I can show you if it like self-cycles here. I can make it a bit quicker. Let's see, if I add 1 and maybe like take away 4, you can see that these two are kind of like fighting it out a bit, and this is just like such nice like modulation source. It's great. The maths can do so much more than that, but that's just like a little tiny overview of it. There are, again, videos that go way more in depth than I have. Here is the Woggle Bug right next door. This has a master clock, which is nice and stable. It has a random burst output. You can put a clock into it, so your other random sources will be in time with the rest of your composition. Up here we have random CV, so we have stepped, or we can smooth it out, or we can have the classic woggle output, which kind of like messes up like the tail end of it to make it woggle. I don't know how else to really describe it. And then we have audio that's almost like noise, but it's kind of like pitched. We have like a smooth response, a woggle response, and this crazy one that's kind of like a mix of the both. The Woggle Bug, you should probably read the manual for it. It is just a mind-blowing module that, you know, I've had it for so long and I'm still learning more about it. The tempi is also really, really deep, but I like this one a lot. You have a clock that goes in to this tempo thing, and you have 6 channels of clocks. So what you can do is you can like divide this by 2, you can multiply this by 2, by 4, by 3, you can divide by 3. So and then all of these clocks are sent out by these, so you can get some really nice compositions going. You can also mute channels, or you can link 2 channels together with this B function, and then whenever the mod gets a gate, then these 2 will switch, or however many you have, they will switch. So you can get some really complex things going. You can also speed this up by 1. You can slow this down by 1. Yeah, it does a whole bunch. It's almost like the brain of the system. Here's the Renee, sorry. You can pick whichever output the sequencer will be at. You can clock the X, you can clock the Y independently, so it's kind of like a Cartesian plane. You can do a whole bunch with it. There's like an axis page. You can turn off different parts of it, so it can't go to those spaces. You have X gate page, which controls whether or not you have a gate put out at the X output every time that one of these isn't lit or is lit. You have the same thing but with the Y clock output right here. Here is the X function page. You can go forward, reverse, or in a pendulum motion. You can also put this thing into snake mode, so it goes through like these neat patterns that you can change. Over here you have sleep and seek, you have glide, and you have clock reset. All of these are different functions here, and then you have like these clock logic pads down here for both X and Y. And the Q page, this is like a nice quantizer. You have all like the notes on the scale here, and you can turn them on and off and make your own scales. You can also save 4 of the configurations onto these 4 slots. Yeah, so that was like an extreme glossing over of the whole system, but you kind of have an idea of what everything does now, and I will show you some patch examples in the future if you'd like. Thank you for hanging around for this whole 31.5 minutes. I do appreciate your views and your attention, so thanks a lot for hanging in there. I will see you next time. I'm Jesse Hawley. Thanks.